Folks, if you haven't heard about Anchor on Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. While hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. This is Double T here on the Double T Podcast Network, welcoming everybody in from here and around the globe to another edition of How Screwed Up Our World Actually Is, particularly the United States. But before we do that, we would like to offer up our hearts and prayers to the good people of Ukraine who are still holding up against a brutal attack from an insane man on what I can only describe as a brutal act of genocide. But make no mistake about this, folks. This is Joe Biden's war. His war against Russia, and when it all shakes out, you'll realize it. But enough about that. Today we are going to focus on another very delicate subject, as we did recently with mass shootings. We're going to talk about last week's landmark decision by our Supreme Court overturning a 1973 ruling 410 U.S. 113, more commonly known as Roe versus Wade, which was a landmark decision in which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution of the United States generally protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion. The decision struck down many federal and state abortion laws and fueled an ongoing abortion debate in the United States about whether or to what extent abortion should be legal, or who should decide the legality of abortion and what role of the moral and religious views in the political sphere should be. It also shaped the debate concerning which methods the Supreme Court should use in constitutional adjudication. The case was brought by Norma McCorvey, known by the legal pseudonym of Jane Roe. In 1969, became pregnant with her third child. McCorvey wanted an abortion. She lived in Texas, where abortion was illegal except when necessary to save the mother's life. Her attorneys filed a lawsuit on her behalf in U.S. federal court against the local district attorney, Henry Wade, alleging that Texas abortion laws were unconstitutional. A three-judge panel of the U.S. District Court for Northern District of Texas ruled in her favor and declared that the relevant Texas abortion statutes unconstitutional. The parties appealed this ruling to the Supreme Court of the United States. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court issued a landmark 7-2 decision holding that due process clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides a fundamental, quote, right to privacy, end quote, which protects a pregnant woman's right to an abortion. The court also held the right to an abortion is not absolute and must be balanced against the government's interest in protecting a woman's health and prenatal life. The court resolved these competing interests by announcing a pregnancy trimester timetable. But of course, more regulations. So what they did was they came up with a trimester timetable. During the first trimester, governments could not regulate abortions at all, except to require that all abortions must be performed by a licensed physician. Now that makes sense. During a second trimester, governments could regulate the abortion procedure, but for purpose of only protecting maternal health and not for protecting fetal life. Well, that makes sense. Oh, Lord. After viability, which includes third trimester pregnancy and the last few weeks of second trimester, abortions could be regulated or even prohibited if the laws provided exceptions for abortions necessary to save the, quote, life, end quote, or health, quote unquote, of the mother. Where's the baby stand in all of this? The court also classified the right to abortion as, quote unquote, fundamental, which required courts to evaluate challenged abortion laws under the strict scrutiny standards. Get that? Strict scrutiny standards. That sounds so damn important. That's the most stringent level of judicial review in the United States. So the Supreme Court decision in Roe was amongst the most controversial in U.S. history. Roe was criticized by some in the legal community, including some who supported abortion rights and thought that Roe reached the correct result when going about it in the wrong way. Some called it a form of judicial activism. Others argued that it didn't go far enough, as placed within the framework of civil rights rather than broader human rights. And anti-abortion politicians and activists sought for decades to overrule the decision, consistently showing that a plurality and majority is, especially going into the 21st century, opposed overruling Roe versus Wade. Now, geez, with so many different conflicting points of view, I mean, don't you think this is just like a hornet's nest and there's like 5 guys standing around it with a stick just to see who can get it open first? Come on. So despite the criticism, the Supreme Court reaffirmed it in central holding in its 1992 decision, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, although Casey overruled Roe's trimester framework and abandoned Roe's strict scrutiny standard in favor of a more malleable undue burden test. But, you can't leave a hornet's nest on the ground with some idiot coming along at some point, gonna poke it till it opens. So on June 24th in 2022, which was just a few weeks ago, our Supreme Court overruled Roe, in which the majority opinion described, quote, egregiously wrong, end quote, in Dobbs versus Jackson. I mean, you can write songs about these court cases, I guess. Women's Health Organization, on the grounds that the U.S. Constitution makes no reference to abortion and was unknown in U.S. law till well. Well, you know something? There's a lot of things in the U.S. Constitution that weren't made reference to that are going on in 2022. You might as well just rewrite the damn document. It's a living, breathing document. You have to be a little smarter than that, justices of the Supreme Court. Just a little interjection on my part. This year was criticized by dissident opinion and disputed by same law historians, who argued that many 21st century rights are taken for granted, such as contraceptive interracial marriage and same-sex marriage that are not also explicitly mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. See, I told you so. See, but I knew that was coming. You did. So the decision was supported and imposed by the anti-abortion and abortion rights coalitions, respectively, and it was generally condemned by international observers and figures such as foreign leaders like Boris Johnson from the UK, Emmanuel Macron from France, Olaf Scholz from Germany, amongst others. So that's an awful lot to put on your plate to digest. I know it is. And, you know, I'm sure that upsets a lot of people no matter what side of this you sit on. So let's think about it rationally. Can we do that for a moment? Rational is a good thing. The war on this issue has been going on for more than 50 years. It's been sitting on the books for 50 years, and once they got the kinks out of it, it sat on the books for 50 years with, you know, not too much controversy, I might add. Okay? It's had its supporters, it's had its detractors, but it's been relatively functional over the years. Now, if you ask me what my stance is personally, it doesn't matter what my stance is. I'm just here to bring you two sides of an opinion, bring you some facts, let you make your own choice. I'm not a big government guy by any means. I'm not a person that thinks that every part of my life or your life should be regulated by the federal government. I do believe in rules. I do believe in laws. I don't like the Supreme Court's I don't like the government's hand in my pocket all the time, and I don't like the Supreme Court, with their hand up my back trying to control me like a puppet. But I do believe in laws and rules. Without them in society, we would have nothing but anarchy. I do believe that also. I did a little research on my own, and, when I did talk to people, in particular women, about their feelings on this issue. I asked one woman in particular, how does this really change anything? Because I'm a little bit more naive to this than a woman is. I concede that point. And I asked someone whose opinion I respect tremendously. And she said a few interesting things to me. And one of the biggest interesting facts that she brought out to me is that we don't always see or choose not to see sometimes, for example, what goes on around us. Because we live in a very sheltered little bubble sometimes. For example, the amount of drug addicts who repeatedly become impregnated, should they now be mandated to carry their child to term? And should we be saddled with that? Should a woman who knows that her child has a terrible, uncurable disease be forced to carry her child to term and watch her child die a painful death? Where is the Supreme Court's broad stroke brush decision on things like that? When it comes to issues of incest and rape, should your daughter be forced to carry that child? Should these things be allowed to happen? Should your child be forced to carry the baby of her rapist or her incestuous rapist? These are questions that I'm curious about. And I'm not so certain that I'm comfortable with the Supreme Court telling anybody what they can do with their body. What's next? What's the next landmark decision that they're going to make? To me, this is a lot about control. And I'm not in favor of anybody having control over anybody that has sound mind enough to control themselves. So I'm going to tell you at this point, I'm not in favor of abortion, but I do think, I do support abortion in cases. However, I don't think that anybody has the right to look anybody else in the eye and tell them what they can or cannot do. I'm not anybody's judge, jury, or executioner, and neither should you be. Everybody will sit before their judge soon enough, and you have to explain yourself to somebody a lot higher than the U.S. Supreme Court or some idiot that sits in the White House. So, as I said earlier, this law stood on the books for over 50 years, and what is this landmark new decision brought us? It brought us an assassination attempt on a Supreme Court justice. It brought us a leaked brief from a Supreme Court justice that we have never seen before. You have protests in the streets at Supreme Court justices' homes, which is absolutely ridiculous. Over what? Who keeps pushing these buttons? It's ridiculous. Why does it always have to be a controversy brewing? Why? Can't there just be a little peace in this country for 5 minutes? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you something. Nancy, Chuck, Joe, Jerry, and Shivy Boy, you effed everything up beyond repair in this country, and I hope you're pleased with the results, because you're just pushing narratives to take America's mind off of how bad you're doing, and you're trying to change and take the focus off of the upcoming midterm elections. That's my guess. Okay? That is my guess. So Pelosi and Schumer, Biden, Nadler, and Schiff, you fucked this thing up so bad that you're pushing every other narrative you can. You're still blaming Trump. All right? Get off it. You guys have collectively ruined this country over the last 18 months. And you, my friends, will be judged in November in 2024. All right? We could not have a better bunch of whores running our country right now. And that's it for me, folks. So if you have time, take a minute and stop and smell the roses while you still can. And if you have a chance to do a random act of kindness for someone, take that opportunity. Because if you do, the world will be a much better place to live. And until the next time, folks, this is Double T saying, stay safe out there.